up to 11,000. Bodies littered the streets between the charred remains of buildings. Even the Spaniards reeled in shock. One soldier emerged from the silence of the aftermath, frozen like a wooden statue, until he died. A Mobile fighting man hung himself by his bowstring, rather than be left to survive alone. 82 of De Soto's men died, and every one of his soldiers was wounded, many seriously. For a month, the army was forced to stop and recover. Then, as the surrounding Indian nations watched in horror, De Soto renewed his march. But his army had been weakened. The tide was beginning to turn. In April of 1541, the invaders reached the Mississippi River. There, De Soto heard stories of the powerful Natchez nation, direct inheritors of the grand Mississippian culture. Natchez influence, both economic and military, spread in all directions along the Mississippi. Their temple pyramids rose majestically along the banks of the rivers. The Natchez paramount chief, Quigaltam, was heir to the tradition of the great sons and spiritual head of a powerful religious aristocracy. His title was Son of the Sun. He was carried on a litter so his feet would never touch the ground. His head was flattened according to Natchez custom, and tattoos of black, red, and blue designs were etched across his body. De Soto, claiming that he too was a child of the sun, summoned the Natchez leader to the Spanish camp. Quigaltam sent back his reply.
With respect to what De Soto said about being the son of the sun, let him dry up the great river, and I will believe him. With respect to the rest, I am not accustomed to visit anyone. On the contrary, all of whom I have knowledge visit and serve me, and obey me, and pay me tribute. Quigaltam, Natchez.
De Soto would never meet Quigaltam or see the wealth of the Natchez. On May 21st, 1542, he died. His body was buried in the Mississippi. Over the following year, De Soto's army ventured as far west as Texas before returning to the Mississippi. There, they built a flotilla and headed downriver for the Gulf of Mexico. En route, they were met by 100 magnificently painted Natchez canoes arrayed in battle formation. Seated under canopies, fighting men dressed in vivid colors and wearing large headdress plumes drove the Spanish boats out of Natchez territory and downriver, where one tribe after another picked up the pursuit. The Spaniards reached the Gulf of Mexico on July 18th, 1543, setting sail for Spanish outposts on the Mexican coast. For the American Indian nations, De Soto's expedition mercifully came to an end. But it would not be the end of De Soto's influence on the continent. 20 years later, another expedition would enter the southeast, this time to colonize. In Spain, the agricultural wealth of the region had become legendary. But the new arrivals found few people and could barely survive. In desperation, they traveled north to the land of the Coosa, where De Soto's army had passed through 12 thriving towns on a single day's march. But instead of the fabled towns, they found ruins and temple mounds deserted and overgrown. And instead of populations of thousands, they found only pockets of survivors.
Our village had once been very great and populous. But other men similar to you destroyed it and forced us to run away in fear. Nanepakana kusa.
Unknown to De Soto, the sick man he had left with the Kusa carried a weapon far more deadly than Spanish arms. While the army carved a path of destruction through the southeast, a hidden enemy that would take more Indian lives than all the generals and conquistadors combined was secretly traveling among them.
The Europeans had tremendous immunity and resistance to the diseases that they had known for tens of thousands of years. Smallpox, even the plague, chickenpox, whooping cough, measles, mumps. The Indians had no epidemic diseases. None of these were there. Consequently, they had no immunities, absolutely no resistance. So a disease as simple as mumps that we think of today as a childhood disease, it would come into an Indian community and quite possibly kill off 20% of the village. Then the next year, another disease could come through, such as smallpox, and kill off perhaps 30% of the village. So the Indians were tremendously weakened by disease.
Knowledge was lost as elders died suddenly. Nations were thrown into upheaval. In less than 20 years, civilizations that had flourished for centuries swirled into oblivion.
Our next hour looks to North America's east coast, from the Arctic to Virginia. There the Indian nations would meet another